All right. Good morning. So, change is the theme of today's message. So often the theme of life, right? But what I've always found particularly interesting about change isn't what's changing or how something is changing. I don't even really find the starting point and the pivot and the end point particularly that interesting. I actually find how we react as human beings when things change the most interesting. And I've studied this a bit. Sometimes it's in my own reaction, but mostly it's learning while I watch others react to change. I grew up in Pawleys Island. It's a tiny little town on the coast of South Carolina. And it was always, my whole life, just me and my mom, just the two of us doing our thing. She worked really hard to make sure that I got good grades. She was actually pretty strict. I had a bedtime until I was a senior in high school. I wish I wrote that as a joke for this piece, but it was just real. That's real. But I did get into college, and a few months after graduating, I called her to tell her that I was going to move to New York City by myself. When I was 15, my uncle died of cancer. He was only 51 years old, and that was so hard on the family. But as you can probably imagine, it was the hardest on my grandmother. Her firstborn child gone before her. Even at 15, I can remember my grandmother's way of coping with that change. And then, of course, I could never forget the look on my then boyfriend's face when I told him after 11 months of dating that I had a job opportunity in India and that he should quit his job, marry me, and we'd move there together. We were sitting in a steam room in Lower Manhattan. Over time, through my own experiences and through watching people that I love navigate change, I began to recognize a pattern. I noticed that people often show up in three different styles, three ways people show up when they're asked to step into something new. First, it's what I call the keepers. Second, the bridgers. And third, the pioneers. Let's start with the keepers. We often misunderstand the keeper. This group is known as traditionalists, but what defines them isn't resistance to change. It's commitment to protecting what matters. We assume they fear change, and sometimes they do. But more often, what they're afraid of isn't the change itself, it's unnecessary loss. Keepers are the people who ask the questions most of us are just too excited to ask. Things like, wait, what are we leaving behind? What wisdom lives inside the way that we've always done things? Have we fully understood what we're about to replace? They remind us that not every old thing is outdated, and not every new thing is an improvement. Their instinct is not to stop us from moving forward, but rather to make sure that we don't lose something precious on our way there. Every community owes more to its keepers than we realize. They preserve the stories that would otherwise be forgotten. They remember the names long after others have moved on. They notice when a ritual quietly disappears, when values begin to erode, when a community starts sacrificing its identity for efficiency. They are the keepers of institutional memory. They remind us that we did not build this community by ourselves. We inherited it from the people before us, and we have a responsibility to pass it along to those coming next. But of course, Every light casts a shadow. The keeper can become so committed to protecting what has been that they struggle to imagine what could be. There comes a point when preserving the past can quietly become imprisoning the future. The same instinct that safeguards wisdom, if left unchecked, resists necessary growth. So the question for the keeper is not, will things change? They will. The question is, can I trust that what truly matters can survive this change? Can I trust that what truly matters can survive this change? I imagine that's pretty freaking close to the thought on my now husband's face, or going through his head as I held his gaze with a straight face, waiting for an answer on whether or not he was going to quit his job, marry me, and move to India. My husband, the keeper. Let's move to bridgers. The bridger is often described as the person that helps others navigate change. But their gift is not simply communication. The bridger's gift is imagination, is connection. Bridgers are the people who can stand with one foot in what has been and one foot in what is becoming. They understand why someone might be holding on, and they understand why someone else feels called to move forward. They are the people who ask, how do we honor where we've been while still making room for where we're going? How do we help people feel heard without losing sight of the work ahead? How do we disagree without becoming divided? Bridgers translate. They listen for the fear beneath the resistance, and they listen for the hope beneath the urgency. They help one person understand another person's perspective, and they remind us that a difference in opinion does not have to become a fracture in relationship. Every community owes more to its bridgers than we realize. They are often the quiet reason a community even survives seasons of uncertainty, because they're the ones who will sit with the person who is hurting while also encouraging the person who is dreaming. And still, every light casts a shadow. The bridger can become so focused on maintaining harmony that they avoid the difficult conversations that change sometimes requires. They can become exhausted from standing between the two opposing sides, and they can forget that building a bridge does not mean carrying the weight of the journey alone. So the question for the bridger is not, can I make everyone agree? They cannot. The question is, can I help us remember that we belong to one another even when we don't see the path forward in the same way? And that was the beautiful role my grandmother played in the change our family went through during Uncle Mark's death. She herself was broken, so she deeply understood the pain that the family was in. Yet, she showed strength for his 2 teenage children who now bore the grief of losing a dad so young. My grandmother, a not particularly religious woman, would smile with swollen and watery eyes and speak out loud of the beautiful place he's in now, the pain that he is not in. She showed up as the matriarch year after year, and at 94, she is still translating pain to hope today. My nanny, the bridger. And lastly, we have the pioneers. The pioneer is described as the person who embraces change quickly and helps move others towards something new. But their gift isn't just enthusiasm for the change. They have the gift of real imagination. Pioneers are the people who see the possibility even before it's fully formed. They're willing to step into uncertainty and ask, what if there is another way? What if what we have always accepted as normal is not the only option? And what if the future is asking something different of us? Pioneers are often the first ones to move, not because they have the answers, but because they're willing to learn while they're walking. They understand that waiting for complete certainty can sometimes become another way of staying stuck. Every community owes more to its pioneers than it realizes. They start the conversation that everyone else eventually joins. They take the first step when there is no guarantee that others will follow. And if you really think about it, every movement for justice, every great discovery, every meaningful transformation began because someone was willing to believe that the way things were not always the way they had to be. Pioneers remind us that honoring the past does not require us to be trapped by it. They carry the question that every living community must ask: what is possible that we have not yet imagined? But, once more, every light casts a shadow. The pioneer can become so focused on what could be that they lose patience with those who need more time to arrive. They can mistake urgency for wisdom. They can underestimate the value of process, preparation, experience, and the concerns of those that are simply moving more carefully. The same courage that allows them to see beyond the present sometimes makes it difficult to appreciate the people who helped build the foundation that they are standing on. So the question for the pioneer is not, can I move us forward? Because they can. The question is, can I invite others into a future without leaving them behind? And that style of supporting change with love, with patience, and without fear is exactly the encouraging response I got from my mother when I told her at the ripe age of 22 that I would be moving to New York City. I believe her exact words were, "Hell yeah." And perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: none of these gifts is enough on their own. You see, keepers without pioneers become museums. They may beautifully preserve what once was, but they'll never discover what could be. Pioneers without keepers become reckless. They may race toward the future, but they risk losing the wisdom and the stories that brought them there. And pioneers and keepers without bridgers become divided. Because even the most important conversations cannot transform a community if people no longer know how to listen to one another. But when these gifts come together, something remarkable happens. Keepers, pioneers, and bridgers become a living, breathing community. A community that remembers where it came from, a community that imagines where it's going, and a community that refuses to leave people behind. A healthy community isn't one where everyone agrees. A healthy community is one where different gifts are honored, different voices are heard, and people choose relationship even when the path is unclear. because change will always ask something of us. It will ask some of us to loosen our grip. It will ask some of us to slow our pace. And it will ask some of us to step into the space between two people and remind them that they still belong to one another. So the question for you today is not, am I a keeper, a bridger, or a pioneer? Because the truth is, you are all of these things at different moments in your lives. So the better question is, what does this moment require of me? Because the future of any community is never created by one kind of person. It is created by people who are willing to offer their gifts at the moment that they are needed most. May we be the keepers who honor what is sacred. May we be the pioneers who courageously imagine what is possible. And may we be the bridgers who remind one another that we belong to each other through it all. And may we trust that even in seasons of uncertainty, even when the path ahead is so unclear, we are still becoming together.